The Marvels is a movie I've been waiting for ever since Captain Marvel first came out. Captain Marvel was a huge success at the time, making over $1 billion, and while most sane people could see that this was due to the hype around Avengers Endgame, there were others who claimed that it was the cinematic event of the year, and that the sequel would perform quite well. It definitely didn't, and I'm going to talk about why. We start with our villain, Dar-Benn, who discovers a bracelet similar to the one Kamala Khan uses, and now is as good of a time as any to discuss how I feel about her. Put simply, she sucks. I felt like groaning every time she came on screen. Her actress is pretty experienced, yet she plays this character like she's a villain on an episode of Power Rangers. It's like the director told her to just look as evil as possible and said nothing else. We cut to Kamala, who delivers exposition through an animation talking about her superhero life, which I kind of liked. It's a little in your face and was clearly meant to catch up anyone who didn't watch Ms. Marvel, which was most people. And I'm glad that they did that, but it is clear that they wanted to keep the pacing fast, so they got the info out ASAP. Normally I would prefer a slower paced intro, but the faster we get through this the better. I will say that Kamala is by far the best part of the movie, and she is the most well written. Speaking of writing, we cut to Carol, who is experiencing a last time on Dragon Ball style flashback. This is not a joke at all. It almost feels like the writers think people who end up watching this movie are too dumb to keep up, so they keep reminding us where they came from. This is really the problem with the MCU recently as a whole. There is so much going on that when you have to tell a single cohesive story, you end up having to re-establish characters entirely. Carol and Monica end up touching a glowing wall at the exact same time, while Kamala is wearing her bangle, causing the three to switch places when they use their powers at the same time. Things lining up in this way is so unlikely that I don't even feel like getting into it, but it should be mentioned that this is pretty crazy. I did like the action scene this resulted in, but I feel like Carol is way too overpowered here, and it's a problem that lasts throughout the movie. The fighting itself is pretty well choreographed and looks good outside of the rare CGI moment. Once the fighting is over, Kamala ends up back home and Nick Fury arrives with Monica. Kamala gets excited and tries to show her powers, which makes her switch places with Carol, who was spying on the Kree. Carol and Monica reunite, but because Carol never came to visit, it ends up being awkward. We'll get into her reasons later, but she's been gone for almost 30 years, and this girl was very young when she left. Expecting to pick up right where you left off is just dumb. Carol then leaves by flying straight up into the air. Keep in mind that we know for a fact Carol knows she will switch places with someone if they use their powers at the same time.
Entanglement, our light powers are entangled, so we switch places whenever we use them at the same time.
She had just started a fight with the Kree before she switched, so there is a very high chance Kamala is using her powers in her own fight. She has no reason to believe that Kamala can fly, so she basically decided that the very high risk of Kamala dying was worth it. The two switch back because of course they do, leading to Fury telling Monica to use black girl magic to save Kamala. The only problem with this line is that it's just not something people say in conversation. It's something you might see at the end of an Instagram caption, and it feels a lot more unnatural because of that. Monica fails to save her anyway, so Kamala makes a cocoon for them to survive the fall, and at the last second they switch with Carol. They definitely would have died on impacts, so that was really fortunate. It's nice to see that they're keeping the coincidences in this movie to a minimum. Otherwise, this might seem like a first act built on happenstance instead of good writing. Carol then goes to the planet the Skrulls are taking refuge on and attacks Dar-Benn, which makes her drain the atmosphere of the planet. Carol and Monica are aware that they can't save everyone, while Kamala can't accept leaving anyone at all, which I think is a nice touch. Kamala hasn't had the same level of experience as the other two, so she hasn't had to deal with being powerless to stop something like this. Unfortunately, they don't do much with it, but it was a good setup at the very least. Once the Kree are taken care of, the three talk about their next move, and because Kamala was the only one who saw the map to where Dar-Benn was headed, they link up using memory devices so Carol can see them, which instead gives us another flashback, this time showing Monica's mother dying. This is better than the memory store from Doctor Strange, but it still has its problems. How do these things work? We know Carol can control how far back it goes,
Go back.
and Monica tells her to stop going back into the past, so why does she keep going until she loses control? Did she think Kamala had to see Monica's mother dying? She claims it wasn't on purpose, but if it wasn't, why did they stay inside the memories after seeing the map? This was something done completely for the audience that makes no sense in universe. The trio have a training montage which does not help them at all down the line, and it's mainly meant to make you believe that these people actually like each other. They arrive at Aladna, where Carol's husband is waiting. It's interesting how they frame the marriage as something Carol did just to help out a friend. Carol is the only major MCU character who hasn't gotten a love interest, and I think this was made as sort of a joke to bring up that fact. It almost feels like someone pitched the idea of Carol having a secret husband, and the idea was warped a little, and this is what we got. Oh, and everyone on the planet can only sing, they can't speak, which it seems like they did that purely as a setup to get Brie Larson singing in an MCU movie, like she did in Scott Pilgrim, but you have to give her a good song for this thing to work. Scott Pilgrim got it right well over a decade ago, yet this movie couldn't. The trio gets these washed out suits that look like they came from Spirit Halloween. I know these suit changes exist merely for selling toys, but it still should be said that these changes are not good in the slightest. The Captain Marvel one in particular is outrageous. The design isn't even horrible, it's really just the color that makes it look like a deep fried version of the last one. Dar-Benn arrives, thankfully putting an end to the music, and the fight between her and Carol is the biggest example of Carol being nerfed. Dar-Benn should realistically be about as strong as Kamala, if not weaker, because Kamala seemingly has more experience. I'm not a power scaler, but keeping power levels consistent in stories like these is necessary for the stakes. If power levels are all over the place, the suspense in the fight is gone because you know the character will be just as strong as the plot demands, which also hurts emotional investment. You end up tuning these scenes out, which is the exact opposite of what's intended. Carol and Monica of course fail to stop Dar-Benn because it's not the climax yet, leading to a heart-to-heart in the field. Carol reveals that she ruined the Kree's planet, and she didn't want Monica to see that version of her, so she stayed away for 30 years trying to make things right. Did she think Monica would sense the bad effects of what Carol did? I can understand waiting a little bit for Monica to grow up, but 30 years is crazy. After all that time, she couldn't figure out how to help the Kree. She had the time to get married and be crowned. Surely one of the geniuses she met during the events of Endgame could have done something. This plays into what I was talking about earlier. These stories are disjointed and too often are written as if they don't have a greater story to cling to. Carol realizes that Dar-Benn is targeting people she loves, so they go to the Kree, who are on the MCU equivalent of the Watchtower. The escape pods are down and they have a ton of people that they need to evacuate. They decide to make the fake cat monsters eat the people and pile into one escape pod. I'm going to ignore the obvious questions about digestive fluids and the ability to breathe in there, because this is a clearly tacked on B-plot that exists for the sole purpose of stretching out the already low runtime. The trio, how many times have I said that, finally go after Dar-Benn and defeat her, just for her to trick them into letting her get the bangle. She ends up getting overloaded with energy from Carol, even though she was easily able to absorb that exact same energy before in this very movie. This is so lazy it hurts. It's almost like they got to this point in the script and realized Dar-Benn was still there, so they had her dissolve in midair to get her out of the way for the next part of the story. Carol goes back to Kamala and gives her the bangles that just killed the last person who wore them with no hesitation. I know Kamala says that these things went through time and space to get to her, but a little bit of self-preservation might work a little better here. All they would have to do is have her look at the bangles and hesitate to take them, then have Carol or Monica say something like, "Go ahead, put them on." This is a quick fix, but they speed past it to get to the big emotional moment. Dar-Benn tore a hole in the universe, so Monica has to go into an alternate dimension to close it. I like how this movie has consequences, and because of that, this ending is way better than Quantumania's. Things have changed drastically, and we see the effects of Monica being gone ripple throughout the rest of the story. The rest of the movie has Carol moving into the house Monica grew up in, and Kamala goes to Kate Bishop to tell her she's forming a team. Why she would be the one setting this up, I do not know. People get mad at critiques of these movies and will claim things like, "You don't like fun if you complain about this movie." First off, people value different things, and for them, a fun scene that makes sense is better than one that is just fun for the sake of being fun. I am definitely one of those people, and I think that's pretty common. We should be asking for the best version of these stories, not excusing dumb moments for the sake of quote-unquote fun.